Chess, nonsense, and analysis.
Yes, Watu. Here we are again. 5 minutes a day. Which world champion are we tackling today?
Emanuel Lasker, second world champion, amazing player. Yeah.
Amazing player indeed. I don't think he gets too much credit, though. I mean, what is Emanuel famous for? Of course, he beat William Steinitz to become the second world champion. But what should we know about this guy?
You know, the interesting thing is that, again, I think, it's the phenomenon in terms of, if people have never seen you live or whatever, they tend to respect more the people that they see in action, Well, for me, in history, he's been known. If you look at chess books, basically the first thing I remember reading about Lasker was that he introduces chess psychology, so to speak.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the things that they look at. What do you remember from? But he's got other aspects which we're going to talk about. But I mean, that stands out for me.
Yes.
As in,
definitely. Look, I encountered most of the world champions in this fantastic book by Garrick as part of my great predecessors. And of course, everybody mentions the fact that Lasker was a master of psychology, or he used it in his games. One can also kind of view it as he was willing to take risks, right? A lot of us, especially myself, actually, a lot of times I'm not willing to take risks during game. And Lasker kind of uses that to his advantage, knowing his opponents and so on. But he did a bit of everything. I mean, I'm not quite sure what to put my finger on where he was best. I mean, he was playing the end game well. His openings were relatively modern at the time. He was playing E4 and D4. And he's got epic matches, right, against Frank Marshall and Steinitz and perhaps I would say the main thing that I know about Lasker is this tremendous feat of him carrying the world title for, is it 27 years?
Yep.
I mean, that's almost a lifetime, right?
A lifetime.
For being world champion. So that's absolutely amazing. But I must admit, I probably don't know him as well as I would know your Garry Kasparov or your Anatoly Karpovs of modern day, right? So I guess this is also part of why we did this. Started the series with these legends of the past to get to know and get to learn more from them. So yeah, what stands out for you, or what are we going to see in the series from Lasker?
Right. So, well, for me, the one thing. Okay, I'm not going to show the games though, because there's a lot to look at.
Yeah.
But I was actually pleasantly surprised when I was looking deeper into him. His preparation was good, actually. There's one, I mean, the viewers can look at that themselves. The second match against Steinitz, because he plays the first match in 1894 and the second one in 1896. The 1896 match more. I mean, there was one line where Steinitz was playing the Italian, like bishop c4, bishop c5, c3, knight f6, d4. This stuff takes check, knight c3, then takes on e4, right?
Yeah.
And there was one sacrifice that Steinitz was making where he plays some bishop a3 at some point, trying to keep the king in the center. Well, it's dubious. I mean, with the computers, today's computers and stuff, right? But of course, they were analyzing on their own.
Yeah.
And the one game Lasker manages to beat Steinitz, his king goes to f7, then to g6, and he's got a queen on f6. It's a very nice game. He plays h5. His king stays there for a long time, and Steinitz and Lasker is able to just defend nicely, brilliantly.
Okay.
Then Steinitz repeats it like the next time he gets white, and Lasker goes into it, but instead of accepting the sacrifice this time, Lasker gives the piece back and finds a solid way to play where he castles queenside, but he's then just slightly better, but his position is, so he really managed. I respected that because his preparation was quite amazing. Lasker's preparation,
Nice.
and so that is the first thing I saw, like very strong opening preparation. And then, when next thing I saw is that he could really do anything. I mean, very well. I mean, he could play end games very well. He could play openings very well.
Yep.
He could play wild stuff, wild middle game. He could play very positional middle game. He basically was for me, the first universal player at the highest level.
You could say that, yeah.
And
I agree.
yeah, very universal. And for me, I just wanted us to, can we have a look at some games? Then,
of course, let's glance at a bit of what we'll see in the series
we'll
and maybe
glance.
something else.
Should we start first at this, for me, very interesting game, Marshall against Lasker, 1907?
Yes.
So this was the first game of the World Championship. And before this, Marshall had done well in one international event. And, the guys thought that he was ready to take on Lasker. He plays Lasker, but he wasn't. Lasker blasts him off out of the water, basically. Lasker won this match with 7 wins, no loss, and a couple of draws. So 7-0. He beats Marshall,
Crashing.
And so this is the first game. And I think after this first game, possibly Marshall doesn't recover well. We'll go very quickly past it. I mean, past the opening.
Yeah. So just to the viewers out there, I mean, we are doing this. You'll also see this game in our series. In the 5 minutes a day series, we are more trying to just show the games and give you a bit of analysis. Here, we are trying to talk a bit behind the scenes as well. Just talk about the player himself. So, yeah. What do we have here? This is your early D4 in the, what is this, Rai Lopez, right?
Yeah. It's the early D4. I don't know what it's called, a Scotch or whatever. Gambit, I'm not sure what it's called, but one of the things, I like what you said, Kelvin, and I wanted to add that to the viewers out there, the question is, why are we doing this? The answer is that you need to understand and study each of what the world champions brought.
Yes.
Because those are the tools you need in your own chess, right? The tools that the world champions were using, you need to sort of clean up and try to use in your own game to improve further.
Yeah, I love that Watu, and maybe if you can think about it in a sense of as the timeline of chess history continued, right? Every world champion started learn from the past, but also try to add something or adapt a bit and improve. And you can kind of see it as the world adapting to these ideas and strategies and so on. So if you study the world champions, it's almost like you are going through a bit of a time warp, and you are just absorbing everything of almost a whole century worth of experience, right? So
exactly.
You have, if you're a serious chess player, you have to study the world champions. I think that's a key.
There's no other way.
So, yeah.
There's no other way. So,
okay.
So knight takes d4, castles, knight f5. This is theory. D5 takes.
Interesting. I had a game like this a couple of years ago. It's still relevant, right? So
it is very relevant. Rook e1. I mean, it's relevant today.
Yeah.
I know, for an example, today Rook e8 is played.
Yeah.
And then the idea is that after f3, black plays knight d6, and then the knight will go to f5. This is basically today's theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what is interesting here in this position, after Rook e1, is that Lasker plays Queen h4. And this is now the psychological moment. Because Lasker understands that Marshall is very strong when it comes to attacking. Right?
Yes. He's known for that, right? Yeah.
He is known for that. And for anybody who would doubt, I can say, look, in no less than, I think I know off the top of my head, 2 openings where Marshall contributes. First and foremost, the Marshall attack in the Rai Lopez.
Yeah.
Where you sacrifice on d5, right? And so on.
Yes.
The second one is the Marshall gambit in the Slav. That d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, e6, e4 takes knight takes bishop, b4 check. Bishop d2, queen takes d4, right? That.
Yeah.
So he was, I mean, he was very talented. He was coming up with his own ideas and variations with initiative. So Lasker wants to deny him this initiative, plays f6. And after f3, he plays f takes e5. Very, very strong psychology because f takes e4, d4. Now, the point is that Marshall is put in a very uncomfortable situation because now he has to defend.
Yeah.
And obviously, because he's a strong attacker, Lasker knew he's going to see the option, the options against him, right? So it's using his strength against him, against himself.
Brilliant.
Sort of, you know?
It's brilliant.
Brilliant.
Brilliant psychology
So,
here by Lasker.
Brilliant psychology.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just psychology in a vacuum, like, okay, I'm risking and doing. Even this, what he chooses, with best play, it's a draw. You know, Garry Kasparov showed it in my
analyzed it in his book.
Yeah. So g3 is still correct, queen f6. And Marshall made a mistake by playing bishop takes d4. The correct move is bishop d2, by the way, here. And Kasparov analyzed queen f2 check.
Looks scary to allow this even for white. Looks scary.
Very scary. Very scary.
Bishop g1, I suppose.
G1. Yeah. Now, there are a number of moves you have to find. I mean, you have to find bishop f1, which I think Marshall would have found against the, because you're trying now bishop e2,
bishop e2, bishop f3. Yeah.
But then you have to find bishop e1, not an easy move to find. Then you have to find queen e3, knight d2, bishop e2, and right here it's then a perpetual.
Right? Yeah.
So we're talking about with the best play, it would fizzle out to a perpetual. But okay, he plays bishop takes d4. There's an interesting position I want to go to, and this is the one. Now, this highlights for me the incredible skill that Lasker has in the endgame. And I think today we see Magnus Carlsen possessing the skill, you know, this prophylactic way of playing and feeling what is a threat against you or a potential threat against you, and the ability to stop it even before it comes, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So in this position, let's have a look and say, well, what's happening? Well, what is happening is that, first and foremost, Black has got rook and a bishop, which is good, a better combination against rook and knight if we're not talking about attacking the king, right? With pawns on both sides of the flank.
Yeah.
But there are many weaknesses that Black has. You know, the pawn on d4 is in white's territory, and then c6, c7 are doubled pawns.
Yes.
So the white's knight, Black's nightmare is the white knight landing on b3. So you play something, I play knight d2, and then next I play knight b3. And now you're in serious trouble because c5 is not readily available because the pawn is also weak and d4 is weak, and Black could be in danger of losing this position.
I can even see, even if Black manages to play bishop takes knight on b3, you play a takes b3, and then the rook is all of a sudden active on the a file. You can hit all of these weak pawns, right? So it's not such a straightforward position for Black here.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But he finds a beautiful way to play it. He plays rook b8. So he's forcing basically white to play b3. And now when white plays b3, white takes away the square for the knight.
Square, yeah.
And then he plays rook b5 next. So rook b5. Now what he wants to do is, obviously, the knight wants to move to c4. So he wants to take away that as well. Because if knight d2, he wants to play rook c5.
Yeah.
Bishop
a6 or something to follow.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, Kasparov shows that
white can maybe still hold it.
Yes, white can still hold. That's the best move, knight d2. But Marshall plays c4, a horrible move now. But Marshall now takes away the c4 square from his own knight, creates a pass pawn on d4, and Lasker goes on to beat him in a very nice game. The next game I wanted to show, so psychology, a beautiful psychological game that he beats
Frank Marshall with,
Marshall with in the World Championship first game, and then, you know, then the next game I would like us to have a look at, please, is this one. Where against Chigorin. So this one, Lasker is already world champion, but remember that Chigorin played 2 World Championship matches against Steiner.
Yeah.
So he's also one of the top players. And
Yeah.
and so Lasker, let's have a look at this game that Lasker plays against him. So Lasker plays with the black pieces here. And okay, Chigorin plays D3, D6. It's interesting that in many of their games, if one is interested, the viewers should see Chigorin threw everything against Lasker. I mean, here Chigorin played against Lasker many games before, and Lasker takes the pawn and manages to defend beautifully against them.
Similar
And
to the Chigorin and Steiner's match, a lot of that
yes.
stuff.
So Chigorin actually, that was his style, but he's played many games against Lasker, and Lasker just manages to defend all the time. So he changes a little bit. He played C3 knight f6, and there are many games before this one where he played D4.
D4.
He's a very aggressive player.
Yeah.
He played D4, pawn takes pawn, check, and like this. But again, Lasker
you can see if Chigorin, the type of player that Chigorin is, he's playing D3 here, then you know exactly. Lasker has got him in some type of. You have to give respect to the guy, right? If he's a player.
He tried many games, and he says, okay, you know what? This guy cannot just
going to the slow D3 stuff now for a change.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, Lasker plays D6 and now knight D2. But now notice that Lasker knows the opponent. Yeah. He knows who he's playing against. And he knows that if he castles here, right, there are very big chances that Chigorin is not going to immediately castle. He's going to do stuff. He might play knight F1, knight E3, G4,
H3, G4, yeah.
Knight F1, knight G3, knight H4. But there's going to be something creative, dangerous coming against Lasker.
And unfortunately, these chessable courses only came out 100 years later, right? So your preparation is maybe not perfect at that point, right? So you don't want to encounter something new like that in the World Championship. Okay?
Yeah. Especially in the hands of Chigorin.
Yeah.
Yeah. In someone else's hands, maybe, but not in someone as creative as Chigorin.
Yeah.
So he plays A6. Notice that he waits for him.
Flexible
Chigorin
as
plays
well.
H3.
Yeah.
He plays Bishop A7. They are playing actually very
This
modern.
This is like a very modern game, right?
It's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Very modern ideas. So Chigorin plays Bishop B3 because he doesn't want Lasker to exchange the bishop. But notice that Chigorin is waiting for Lasker. If Lasker castles, Chigorin is definitely going to G4.
He's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, whether knight F1 first, queen E2, G4, or immediate, doesn't matter, but G4 is going to come.
Yeah.
And Lasker plays knight D7. He takes this, right? So it's incredible like psychology that's going on. So knight F1, they're both waiting. Knight C5, Bishop C2, and then finally, though, Lasker decides to hit in the center and to continue with his plan. Queen E2, and then he plays D4. Right. So pawn to C4, and now Lasker plays F6. Bishop goes to D2, knight E6, knight G3. But now, the position is still very tense. It's not clear what to do here in this position. And Lasker is the first to get his plan going by playing the move B5. Very creative. Very creative. Because, if you think about it, I mean, after C takes B, A, B, D3 is a little bit weak. And maybe later on, Black could do something against the queen side. Very interesting. Bishop B3, knight E7, knight H4, knight C5. Good move. So look at how he's not giving him a chance to be creative. It's as if he's holding his hands. He's not allowing him to attack. And look at this move that Chigorin plays. Chigorin is really creative and going. He wants to create chaos.
Yes.
And Lasker is refusing giving him that chaos. Now, Chigorin, you have to really take your head off the guy. He manages to create both knights there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Lasker castles. Chigorin is looking for chaos.
Finally.
Because
he's got the king castle, and now finally plays G4. Yeah.
Yes. And Lasker plays Bishop B3. And now we look at the defensive genius. Bishop B3, A2 is hanging. And Chigorin plays B4. Possibly Chigorin is expecting likely a knight A6, A3, knight D7. He's quite happy with his position. And we can see he's going to put his knight on F5, his pawn on F4, rook on G1. He's coming.
Yeah.
But now Lasker finds this is Lasker's idea. Knight B3. Because there's no coordination within the rooks. And Bishop takes B3, Bishop takes, now A2 is hanging.
Yep.
But more importantly, we've managed to exchange a very important
The
piece, which is
dangerous
the
like
bishop.
square bishop, yeah.
You're right. Now Chigorin castles, right? And notice how dangerous it is. I mean, if you take, it's really creative. If you take bishop takes a2, he's going to play bishop h6.
Wow.
Yeah, this is really, and Lasker knows this guy
A2
is
is
really
hanging in that
creative,
variation, by the way.
very
Viewers.
dangerous. So he plays
Yeah.
bishop f7, knight f5, and right here, queen e8, exclamation mark. Because he
Forcing the
wants
knight
that
back,
knight,
right?
he forces the knight back. It means when the knight goes back, because if you don't force the knight back, there are things that can
King
come.
h2, rook
King
g1 is coming.
Rook g1, bishop h6, everything.
Yeah.
So when he plays queen e8 and knight g3, now it's gone, and now he plays solidly. Now it's just a pawn, and he goes on and cleans the game. Beautiful game, right?
Yeah, very nice.
The
very
last
nice.
one that I wanted to show that impressed me, he plays against the same Chicorin.
Lasker's got white here.
Last guy's got white here. 1896, last guy's world champion. Remember in 1896 he had to play the return match against Steinitz to defend. He managed to do that. But before this, he still has to, there's this thing to take care of with Chicorin. Because Chicorin is always there, lacking, of course. So now, have a look at this game. So I was really impressed. So he plays against Chicorin. Okay, he's got white. He castles. He's not worried about it. He plays d4. Chicorin plays knight d7. And once again, we start to see this creativity by Chicorin. So Chicorin could be thinking of many things here. And from a modern point of view, you can imagine, like, if now we know, like, a modern point of view, if white were to play h3, that black could play bishop e7, then g5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If we think about the candidates match, not match, but candidates game between Aronian against Kramnik, where right, Aronian managed let Kramnik push his G pawn,
Yeah, so, this is typical idea right nowadays in Italian as well.
Today, right? But I mean, so now notice what he does in this position. He doesn't allow him to create any chaos. He takes on e5. Now, normally, you would frown upon taking on e5, and against any other player, he will not take on e5. But he's taking on e5 because he's going to lose a lot of his advantage. Because right, it's symmetrical.
It's quieting the game down for his opponent.
Yes, but what is it doing? So now he goes queen g4. But have a look. This he calculates, but it's not to checkmate. It is to exchange pieces. Queen f6 is the only move. He takes on d7. Queen h6, bishop takes c8, and we reach this position. Rook d1. Look at this. So now what is happening here? White has got the smallest advantage ever. The bishop, we can argue that the black bishop is bad, but generally black doesn't have too many problems. Black should be able to hold the position.
But black can't really cause complications. That's
but black cannot force, if the issues cannot, has to defend. Yes, it's a draw, but cannot create complications. And this is what he's looking for. So queen g6, but now queen e2. Because for now, we don't have to exchange because queen and knight is a good combination when it comes to the king. So Lasker is hoping maybe in some variations, if imagine we could get the knight to f5, imagine.
Yeah.
Then the queen could do f3, then h4, h5. We've got a very big attack.
That's something
we've got queen yes. We've got queen and knight against queen and bishop. Yeah. So that's why he keeps his queen for a while. So queen is 6, rook d3. So you see, there is a suggestion that it could be an attack against the king. So bishop e7, knight d5. Pawn to c6 is played. All right, so he's managed to defend. I mean, if you play knight e3, I'll take on d3, then play rook d8 after rook takes d3. So more pieces are exchanged, plays a3. Look at the position that he plays on. Rook e8, queen d2. And this is a complete draw. But not easy. Rook d2, h6, g3. Rook c8. Now we must imagine why Lasker is playing on. Well, I'm speculating now that possibly Chicorin is showing signs of frustration, right? Yes, he knows it's a draw, but he's never had a chance, not one chance to create complications.
Exactly.
He doesn't have one chance to win the game.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
No, exactly. I mean, I can just imagine this frustration from the side of black if you want to cause chaos, right?
No, exactly. Although he knows that he's not losing, but he's frustrated at that. Just this guy is just he's grinding him like in a very dry. I mean, he plays Queen F5, G6, Queen F3, and right here he can play Rook D7, and possibly it will be a draw.
Probably
He
a
can play.
handshake pretty soon. Yeah, after that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, probably just a handshake after that pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, Lasker would still irritate him, most definitely, and play on. But or King G7 first, any
Yeah.
of the moves. But now, he's getting restless, he's getting irritated, and he plays King E8. And now Lasker jumps at his opportunity because now all of a sudden the king becomes weak. Because Queen E3 is now all of a sudden a problem. If you play H5, there's Queen H6. And now the king is getting checkmated. Yeah. And so he plays Queen G5, and now he plays F4. But now already White has got a very good advantage. Yeah. For example, okay, he took on F4, which was a blunder. But even if he does play, let's say, Queen E7, after F5, it's still very uncomfortable now all of a sudden. Yeah.
H6 is because still hanging, you're opening up lines. Yeah.
Exactly. B6 square is weak. B7 pawn is weak. Issues everywhere. But anyway, after F4, he takes on F4, and after Queen D4, he unfortunately has to resign.
Queen H8, right? Is the threat.
Yeah, Queen H8 is a big threat, and
can't play F6 and the Queen enters again.
F6, Queen D8, and so. There was not. You can't play Queen E7 because of Queen H8, Queen F8, D8 check, and then you lose, Queen. So unfortunately, there he decided to resign. So yeah, for me, I don't know, what you think, but for me, I feel that you look at Lasker and you see, for me, a very modern player. Ridiculously modern. I mean, I've seen many of his games where he pushes H pawns and very, very, very modern ideas and very creative player. And he never, he could play everything at the highest level.
And, no, for sure. Impressive. So I think that's definitely the case. I mean, we're studying a lot more than I think the usual student does. And there's one game actually that just it sticks in my mind. It's just one game he played against Capablanca. Of course, he ended up losing his title to Capablanca, but at that point, he was already getting a bit older. I think Capablanca was just a rising young star. But there was one game, I think it's against Capablanca, where it's an exchange Rai Lopez, right, with a knight going to E6 eventually, F5 and knight E6.
That's the one in Moscow. They played a tournament in Moscow. I think it was 1928 or something, if I'm not mistaken. And where, he exchanges, then he squeezes Capablanca out.
Squeezes Capablanca.
Yeah. So, exactly.
Yeah, he's got a bit of everything, which is nice. So
yeah.
It's also, like you said, universal player. So I think just worthwhile studying in general. There's a bit of everything in Lasker's play.
But now that you mentioned Capablanca, what is of interest to me is that in that tournament, he showed that he could still play. But he was complaining because they played the World Championship match in Cuba. Now this is like he was already like relatively old. This is now 26 years after he wins the World Championship, right?
Yeah.
So, and he was complaining about the heat. He says, he just couldn't handle the heat, and he was suffering. But what is of interest is that. Some authors, but of course this is subjective views. It's not really objective. Some authors have even gone as far as saying that Capablanca was still wary of him. I mean, he didn't give him a return match. Yeah,
it was a bit trickier in those days, right? To get your return match. It's not just you don't just go through the candidate cycle and get your return.
No. The guy had to agree. Then you raise the money, but he had to be willing, to give you this match. But he wasn't willing so much to give him the match, the return match. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Of course, time was against Lasker, I guess. That would have went on, but interesting stuff. I think it's an absolute fantastic opportunity for everybody to get to learn the second world champion a bit better. As I
Yeah.
pointed out, Watu, and to the viewers, the series that we are doing is 5 minutes a day. We are not going to be talking so much like we are talking in this episode here. Series, we are basically bringing your attention to certain games of interest, and feel free to analyze those games a bit more and go read up, and you'll notice that we take sometimes games from random opponents, sometimes games part of an important match in history. So this is just an opportunity that you basically unlocks a door for you to study a bit more of a certain player and get to know the game a bit more, improve your own game. So
Absolutely.
it's certainly the work for me, Watu, and sure it worked for you as well. Study the world champions, everyone. And today's focus was on Emanuel Lasker. Anything else from you, Watu?
No, not really. Just to say that, I mean, as always, every time as I was looking at Lasker now, of course, I always respected him, but now even more respect, and I'm also thinking it's starting to be difficult now, because when people always say the top 5 best players in one hand, and I'm starting to think that it's not enough. The hand is not enough. There are so many very ridiculously good players. And you cannot say, because who do you leave out, And I'm thinking that Lasker is definitely a player you cannot leave out. We mentioned this when we looked at Steinitz. So Steinitz you cannot leave out. Lasker you cannot leave out. But Capablanca with his talent you certainly cannot leave out. Alekhine with his combinations you definitely cannot leave out. But Vinnick you cannot leave out. Smyslov you cannot leave out. I've left out Oive. Maybe you can argue that Oive, okay? Maybe you can argue that Oive, but you cannot leave out Petrosian.
No,
you cannot
leave
out Tal. No way you can leave Tal out.
Yeah.
You cannot leave out Spassky. You cannot leave out Fischer. You cannot leave out Karpov. You cannot leave out Kasparov. You cannot leave right? You cannot leave out. Maybe we could argue with Kramnik. Maybe you could leave Kramnik out. I don't know, right? You cannot leave out Anand. You cannot leave out Klaasen and Kukesh. We will see what will happen in the future.
Yeah.
So it's already so many world champs you cannot leave out.
Yeah. No, look, actually talking about this list, if the viewers are watching, tell us, who do you want to see next? Should we go? We started with the first world champion and the second world champion. Should we go chronologically in order here? Are we going Capablanca next?
My wish.
Or are we doing someone next? Who cares?
My wish is that we go, you know what? All the world champions we've looked at, actually, Lasker, for me, the preparation to look at Lasker, it wasn't long. It was definitely was not more than an hour.
Yep.
And the reason is very simple. I already have when I was young, I've been studying, looking at books, reading about him from different matches, different players writing about him, and so on and so on. So I knew a lot about Lasker already, and I feel that for the viewers the same. There's one world champion I don't know a lot about. Like now, when I'm talking about from chess point of view, and I'm very much interested to see where was his breakthrough, or how did it look at and this. So I'm thinking the one player I don't really know much about is the current world champion, Kukesh.
Yeah, yes. I think it's maybe the one that we know the least about, right?
Yeah,
still has a long career ahead of him. But
exactly.
Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should comment. Throw your comments, everyone. But that's actually a nice idea, Watu. Maybe we should do Kukesh next. But of course, that's a topic for another day. Today we have spoken about Emanuel Lasker. Let's I think leave it at that for now, Watu. But thanks so much for your input here and your always insightful views, and for showing us a bit here. And to the viewers out there, the following games, there will be some games coming out of Lasker. So watch the space, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the next 5 minutes a day episode. Cheers.